If you're struggling to read more and you feel like you don't have enough time, you're going to want to stick around for a couple of minutes, because I'm going to break down how I read up to 250 books a year and have for the last 7 years. And the first thing you're going to want to do in order to read more is you want to be reading 3 to 5 books or more at a time. And a lot of people say, well, how do you keep all that straight? Look, just try it. You're going to find that what'll happen is when you pick up the book, you'll remember the last thing you read and you'll start reading and it'll all come back to you. So don't worry about whether or not you can remember all this stuff. Just focus on making sure you've got 3 to 5 books and try to make them about different things. You know, have a really good history book, have a good like psychology or a business book or something like that, and something about your health. And you want to put these in very specific places around your home as a way of triggering that thing in the back of your brain to say, oh, I need to read. So the first place and the most obvious place is to have books next to your bedside, like on your nightstand. And the thing is, when you have books on the nightstand, if you spend 30 to 60 minutes a night reading before you go to bed, first of all, you'll sleep better because you're not looking at your phone or TV and being exposed to blue light, but you can knock out a book a week just by doing this. The second place to have them is at your table where you eat your food. Now, if you have a family and you guys eat your meals together, you know, it's obviously better to spend time with your family than to be ignoring them. But I found a lot of times people don't really eat like breakfast and lunch with their families. So wherever it is that you're eating, at least your lunch, have a book nearby so that when you're sitting down to eat, instead of mindlessly scrolling on social media, you're then taking advantage of that time to learn something interesting. And then the third place is to have books at your workspace. So if you sit at a desk all day, or like if you're like me, you have a standing or a treadmill desk, have books next to your desk so that every 30 to 40 minutes or so, take a break, read for 5 minutes to give your brain a break from the work that you were doing. And what you'll find is, it's called the Pomodoro method. What you'll find is you can grab little chunks of information and learn something interesting in between working, and when you go back to your work, you feel really refreshed. Now, just having books in specific places is an easy way to read more. But how do you actually like retain more of that information? And there's really 3 things I would recommend. First of all, always have highlighters with your books. The good thing about highlighters is the simple act of highlighting something makes it seem more important to your brain, and so your brain will store that highlighted information a lot easier because you're physically interacting with the information that you're trying to remember. The second thing is you know, having a pen and leaving notes in the columns, like the sides of the pages, while you're writing. And you could write a simple note. It could just be a couple of words, not even necessarily an entire sentence. And then the third thing is, when you read something interesting, as soon as you possibly can, share that information with somebody else. In fact, they've done studies, and you'll remember up to, it's like almost 90% more of what you learn if you also share and teach that to somebody else. And so just between, you know, having books in very specific places to trigger you to read more, and, you know, actually interacting physically with the book as opposed to just reading straight through it, you'll find that not only can you read more, but you'll also retain more of that. Now, there's a third part of this that isn't necessarily about reading as much as it is about using. I always tell people the smartest way for you to use books is to have a wide variety of reads. So at any given time, if you were to look at my house, next to my bed, I've always got books on like fulfillment, like happiness, joy. I'll also have like biographies or historical books because they're pretty easy to read because they're typically a story about somebody's life. So next to my bed, I'm always reading about people who have lived extraordinary lives, or, you know, different ways that I can be happier. I read a lot of religious books before bed as well, like the Bible and different Buddhist scripts, transcripts and things like that. And so, you know, I have my fulfillment set up next to my bed. So the last thing before I go to sleep every night, I'm learning something interesting about how to be more successful or how to be happier. Now, during the day when my brain is more active, you'll see it, you know, next to my at my kitchen table, I typically have like psychology and economics books. So I'm learning about the economic world that we live in. I'm learning how people behave in that world. And I'm learning better about like how we all think in different kinds of studies that have been done. So I have different kinds of books that I'm reading at the same time. I always have also, some books on health. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll read the books on health. At the end of the day, after I finish work, I'll take 15 minutes to like just decompress, and I'll read something about health. Now, I worked out, in the morning, and I do a lot of exercise in the morning. So in the evening time, it's like I can get a little idea or something that I can add to what I'm doing to then improve on it. And I always have stuff as well on like relationships. I have things about raising kids. I have stuff about, history in general. And the thing is, you want to have a well-rounded palette of books that you're reading, because what you'll tend to find is by reading books, like I'll be reading something on Buddhism, and I'll also be reading something about economics, and there'll be some kind of like combination in my mind of those ideas. And so what ends up happening is you'll be reading about two different things, and those two ideas, you'll be like, wow, I could use these things together to do this. And you're able to become more creative as a result. But if you're trying to read more and you're struggling with this, the easiest thing to do, just to reiterate, make sure that you have books, first of all, that you're interested in reading, like you really want to read them. But secondly, that you're putting them in intelligent places. I even have books in my bathroom. If I go to the restroom, I'm not looking at my phone, I'm reading a book. And I put very specific books in the restroom. It's usually lighter reading, something that's not super in depth, that's going to get me sucked into the book that I then spend way more time in the bathroom than I should. So be smart, set things in specific places to trigger your brain to want to read, to start reading. And what you'll find as a result also is that you'll actually start reading faster the more you read, and you'll be able to get more done. And that's really, the big secret. The reason I've been able to read on average, over 200 books a year for the last 7 years is that I've just arranged my life in a way that there's constant triggers for me to keep reading and to keep learning. And ultimately, by the end of my life, I might have a library of thousands of books that I've read. And it's not like I care as much about having the physical books as much as it's just a good thing, first of all, for me to become a better person, to become a more fulfilled and a more complex person. Like more of my potential is going to be filled as a result of me reading all of these books. But also, having all these books and all this wisdom and all these things that I've learned, I can then pass that on to my kids. And then my kids can pass it on to their kids. And so don't overestimate, how important it is, or I should say don't underestimate how important it is to build a great library, because that library might be the way that you lead yourself into, the promised land of your life, whatever that perfect future you imagine yourself living in is. But you can also give that to your family, to your kids, to your grandkids, and so on, to do the same.